I thoroughly enjoyed today, I must say. I missed, of course, the parallel session. There's disadvantage, you cannot attend all of them at the same time. But I think the feedback from calling has been amazing. I think well done to everyone. And I'd like also to thank you on behalf of Readwell for submitting a paper here. And hopefully you can come back to us again in about 18 months in Barcelona at Leandro's home for our second and final conference for the Readwell. So I attended the session on housing assessment for social and environmental sustainability. There were 4 presentations there. Some of them from our own ESR, so I'm delighted obviously to see them participating obviously and looking at their work at this stage, which is very important. There were some obviously overlaps across the papers. As expected, I mean, that's not a surprise. And I think it's important to state that these overlap were at different levels, I would say, some more in-depth than others. Most importantly, they were all focused on the sustainability aspect of housing. They all looked at the social theme as a backbone to understanding sustainability in our area of concern at the moment. Other important themes that emerged was energy. I'm not going to call it poverty, but energy as a critical aspect of how we manage our homes, especially at this moment that we are all experiencing huge challenges in terms of affording even energy, payment of energy, heating homes or cooling them in the last summer, which was one of the hottest on record. Also, as a common thread was the focus on the building or on the building envelope in particular. So if I just go quickly through the papers, starting with Alberto's and Nacho from Valencia on social life cycle, they propose a new thinking about the life cycle assessment, I think, which is very important. Also a focus on the social impact assessment, looking at comfort and energy, particularly for the poor or the urban poor. I think they're doing some really very interesting work. They have a model home as well to look at and to do some tests and so on. They are proposing new indicators for social life course assessment. I thought that what Alberto shows in terms of the comparison between the SDGs, which is the social, the sustainability development goals, but also taking out of there some impact categories. I thought that was really helpful, and it's worth really looking at into more in depth in the future. They also propose some new methodology or unified methodologies to look at how this social life course assessment is done. I think probably we are lacking some tools there for understanding a little bit what the social aspects are. And also, I think they're also highlighting the uncertainty around the social impacts. So how can you capture social impacts in order to understand the life course assessment? So that's the first paper. The second paper was by Giulia Zorzi and Rola Hasbini. Rola presented the paper. Thank you very much, Rola. It was on simulating heat transfer performance using simulation. So the thermal performance was like the key component of this work, using parametric computer simulation. They had a prototype, obviously, digital one. My question was, when are you going to get the real one? I think they're going to be doing that, I believe, at some point. Some interesting findings about dealing with climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, and mitigation strategies of through design. And one of this design is the type of wall and insulation that you can have into the building envelope in order to reduce energy consumption and so on. So in a nutshell, that was the second paper very quickly, so I don't take too much time. I know it's late. So Zoe, this our ESR Zoe and Saskia, they presented also something on sustainability. I know you changed the title. I don't have the new title. Anyway, so they presented something on sustainability in the housing sector, looking at framework evaluation. And I thought the work was of this conceptualization of the social sustainability was really accurate and revealing and very interesting to take further into their respective PhDs. Well done, really. I was impressed by that work, I must say. They looked at the EU level frameworks for 2020 and focused on the healthy comfort spaces. And then also were quite critical about the assessment tools available to us at this time. So I won't go into details, but if you are interested in assessment tools about sustainability and social sustainability, please speak to Zoe and Saskia. So finally, Annette and Alberto also co-authored this work on rethinking housing and building layers, also life course assessment. So you can see like a common thread about the life course and the circular economy, and then how we can achieve resource efficiency, etc. I thought the work really was quite detailed, very in depth. So well done. I think there's a lot to take from there, and I think this the cradle to cradle proposal is obviously we know is the way forward, but they've been looking at how the methodology can be adapted, and they've used some existing theories to build on, which was really good and very interesting. But also the simulation looking at 100 years plus in terms of life course assessment. I think this is a really exciting work that's being done. So really well done. I was very impressed and pleased by the outcome, and I look forward to future work. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Who is next?
Why not? I chaired the session from housing issues to policy and back, in which I think we spoke more about housing issues than about housing policy in the end, which was a very interesting session with very interesting papers, but which did not have a lot of things in common in a way between them. So not easy to give some sort of red line of this session. So 3 papers. The first one by Alejandro Fernandez, who's been writing it with Henrietta Hafner and Maria Elzinga, who wasn't here, about ESG finance for funding housing retrofit. ESG stands for environment, social, governance standards. If you have a project that applies to certain standards, you can get more easily access to funding, and this is used for housing projects. And in particular, the text was about the way in which this funding influences energy transition in housing development in different countries. I'm not going to give a summary, not of this one, nor of the others. I think you can find it in the abstract, and they will do it better than they explain it better than I will. So please read the abstract. I think a very good point about some contradictory effects of this access to funding, which in a way, when it interacts with the existing finance structures for social housing in different countries, produces sometimes contradictory effects. In fact, does not help to retrofit to do the energy transition of houses. A second paper by Joris Hoekstra and Martina Gentili on the position of young adults in Amsterdam, and the way in which, a very different approach, the way in which these young adults manage their housing trajectory in a city where house prices are soaring, and where these young people have real problems of access to housing. How does that work out in their current day housing practices? Refers back to the practices that David Clapham spoke about in this the first session this morning, in which we saw that well, it's difficult to live in Amsterdam, to find a house, and people, this difficulty has a strong impact on people's life and choices of where they work, where they stay. Many aspects of their lives are influenced by housing, which was by this difficulty of having access to housing, which was another approach to the issue, and a real housing issue. Again, and the third presentation by Sara Karamacci and Marco Peverini. Sara wasn't here. Marco was. I think he left. No, he's still there. About a more territorial approach to housing, and about starting from the observation that of the big distinction between the attractiveness of metropolises in Italy, in particular Milan and Bologna, but focus on Milan, where house prices are rising, and other areas where areas that are shrinking, and where very different problems occur, and the idea, research that's at the very beginning, the idea that housing dynamics could be a good way to analyze the different dynamics in these territories. Was a research to be conducted still, but with this idea that the housing is an indicator also for certain territorial dynamics. So 3 very different papers, which shows, I think, 2 things. First thing, the fact that housing is very diverse, and that we're a very diverse group of researchers, I think, and with different disciplinary entries, economical approach, social approach, territorial approach to housing, and they all mix up, and we need to, if we speak about housing issues, we have to find a way to work with to integrate all these issues. Going back to David Clapham's speech again, which also means that in the end, for policy suggestions, we didn't get very far, I guess, because the complexity of the issue and the difficulty of responding to the social, the economic, and or to put it differently, the first thing, so I got out of the session, was these different approaches to housing. The second thing I got out of the session was the 3 very important, crucial, central dimensions of housing policy today, which are, I guess, the environmental retrofit, the energy transition, the accessibility, and the question of spatial justice, social spatial justice between territories. So trying to mix that up wasn't very easy. I think that the final conclusion sort of was that we do probably need new models. We're at the end of a time, of a period, probably of a paradigm maybe. We do need to find new models, and we're still working on how to get them. And while working on these new models, we should not forget to solve current day problems. So not forget to invest also and to work on how to use the current policy tools we have in the best way.
Hi. Okay. So I replaced Federica Gatta because she had to go. So it's more my one perception of the presentation and the discussion of the panel 2. Panel 2 was about environments and process for co-design. So we had 4 very interesting presentations. The questions and the discussions focused on firstly on the multidisciplinary approach to observe, to understand co-design processes, and 3 of 4 research use particularly the ethnographic approach, with another approach as architectural and geographical approach to understand the behavior of the stakeholders in this process. Secondly, some of certain of presentation focused on the methods to catch the inhabitants, and particularly the less represented publics, and to involve them in the co-design. And we had a lot of questions about the techniques and the difficulties to involve them in the co-design process. And thirdly, and finally, we had a reflection on training of young architects, students in architecture, who are trained to be sensitive to the needs of habitants and olds. And we are able to translate the social dimension in spatial dimension. And this new architect that one of the research, Efrosini Russo, calls spatial agents, seem to be more professional of care.
Okay, so I was in charge of chairing the panel number 6. So it was about new sustainable housing solution in the existing city. And there were three very interesting presentations. The first paper was, Yes, We Can, System of Standards, Practices and Conditions Towards a Socially Sustainable Densification, presented by Marco Peverin. Was not there, he was here in the other panel, but there were Federica Rotondo and Paola Savoldi. They explored the possibility of developing innovative and sustainable housing solution by exploiting critical normative nodes, which they investigate the idea of standards in existing housing policies. They had 3 case studies located in Vienna, in Milan, Cinisello Balsamo, and in Bologna. And there were 3 different ways of transforming space through practices to rethinking about the articulation between the space, the architecture and urban envelope of spaces, and the regulation, the standards, and the norms that were organizing them. In Vienna, there was the reuse of a vacant building, allowing minority categories of the city to be welcomed and build a collective action, in particular students. In Milan, in Cinisello Balsamo, was the elevation of a residential building that opened the possibility of renting affordable housing and thus responding to housing crisis. And was Bologna, the adaptation of public building into temporary housing allowed for the possibility of accommodation of vulnerable people categories, and then transforming the interest part was that then they were transforming and adapting the spatial envelope of the building to meeting these new needs and this new potential of the spaces. So the authors were investigating the idea of a soft densification of urban spaces, so building more inclusivity and more taking more from the building by reinterpreting and redesigning the existing norms. The second paper was entitled Contemporary Social-Spatial Change in the Built Environment of the Socialist Estates in Krakow, presented by Agnieszka Włoch-Szysmla, and she explored how the socialist building stock which is existing. It's a big part of a city as Krakow is now adapting to new social, political, and economic challenges, to the challenges of the future. She put together a multi-scale analysis, so macro, meso, and micro analysis, to question whether large-scale housing estates can meet these demands of sustainability through also questionnaire and investigation of with the inhabitants. And the idea is what there were buildings that were suffering from a stereotypical image, but finally the high quality of life there shows that they have a big potential again of transformation to become something else in the future. The last paper was called Rethink Terranvag Potential for Sustainable Habitat, presented by Lorenzo Ianisotto, and Alexandra Pai was not there, but she's also co-author of the paper. And it was about object of the Terranvag, the wasteland. An important part of the presentation was about the definition. What is Terranvag? How with literature and with research, we can identify, define it, and understand it more. And then it was like presenting the huge potential of these spaces, especially in the city of Lisbon, because they allow to think differently in the city in a sustainable perspective, moving away from a functional and productivistic logic, the idea of allocating spaces to temporary uses, ephemeral initiatives, and something that it's adapting to the enlarging and shrinking of the city that is their natural way of living. He presented some top-down and some bottom-up initiatives to show that we have different kinds of initiatives, a very large diversity of spaces, and yes, it was very interesting at the end. It showed a picture of before and after the appropriation of one of the spaces, and it was fully revealing the potential of something that it's not. He said everything can happen there, and it was especially true because this is something that's void, it's empty in the city, but it's in the contrary, it's full of potential and of the possibility of inhabit the city in a different way. So the discussion were often about how the different researchers could deal with such difficult question. For the first paper was about defining what are the standards. Different cities, different countries have different standards. So how we can choose, how we can move between this diversity of standards and yet to do comparative work. So comparative research. Is it possible to decide about one kind of solution that works? In the second presentation was about how something that is very central in the city can become a very challenging place that was something that existed before, and now how we can transform it for the future. And in the last the paper, the discussion were about again diversity of spaces and how we need to categorize them in. And I think Lorenzo is going to do some work of that, like mapping and categorization of this kind of spaces for his research. And again, the question of time was very interesting. All those kind of paper dealt with the articulation between spaces and regulation, norms, and way of organizing space in a matter of time. Different temporalities were having a different impact on how actors shape the city and how citizens inhabit the city. And yes, they were very passionate and interesting discussion. So thank you for letting me be part of it.
Thank you very much, Marta. Yeah, so since it's quite late and there are two panels that I would like to summarize, I will go a little bit fast. So yeah, please, the eight panelists that I will talk about. Yeah, I hope they won't be upset about this, but yeah, I think that we are all a little bit tired. So I actually will talk about the first panel that was chaired by Lorraine, who had to leave, so I will say a few words about this one to start with. It was on methods and methodologies for knowledge co-creation. And yeah, I think that what was a common element of these different presentations was a try to make sense of complexity or of a complex approach to housing, a holistic approach, housing as a system. And we had some theoretical and also methodological reflections, especially from Mahmoud's presentation, on affordable housing, on sustainable housing, on the understanding of these two concepts from a holistic point of view. But also we had reflections, and this is more in line with methodologies, let's say, on the positioning of the researcher. And Christophe told us that we should take more seriously our own setting. I mean, it was not Christophe saying this, it was also a quotation, but all these reflections tried to bring into the discussion the different terminologies, translations, themes that are put forward in different contexts, in teaching systems related to broader social frames, I would say, that make more themes or certain approaches more in line to general, let's say, discussions in society or societal issues, but also make others more taboo, such as racial or ethnic approaches to housing in France, for example. Yeah, these were some examples. But related to knowledge co-creations, we also had some very concrete elements, let's say, of methods, especially participatory methods, to engage with a holistic approach to housing systems from Margot, who proposed to rather talk about equitable housing in order to better comprehend different aspects aimed at housing productions, different aspects such as living quality, social aspects of living, but also the building aspect and also financial aspects, in housing as a system in which one criteria should not be more important than another one, and in which different actors in the housing production put forward the contradictions or the reasons behind different decisions. And by mapping connections, but also these contradictions, yeah, this housing or equitable housing in its relation to circular economy, to sustainability, can be better understood in a broader framework. And of course, we also had an insight into a very interesting ongoing research of time, and he will have the chance to talk about a little bit more about it tomorrow afternoon in the discussion we will have. So it was another participatory approach, this time to research design involving social housing providers in 3 countries. And yeah, the discussion was about energy, poverty, and how such social housing providers engage with this issue, especially in this, yeah, in the moment in which we are living, in which this is becoming a very pressing issue. And he also focused on measures, but also in relations between tenants and landlords. And there were two reflections from Lorraine that, that I put down. She was asking, and it's also related to the discussions we had, who do these methodologies and methods address, and with what aim? Why do we address certain actors and not others? And this was one of the questions that Tyne got on the role of the state in all these regulation or dealing with this increase in energy costs. So, and how do we adapt the methods that we use when we use them with architects, with tenants, or with homeowners? This was one of Margot's questions, and of course, I think these questions still need some reflection. I mean, how do we choose the actors, but also how do we adapt the methodologies and methods to such actors? And also, there was another question that I think is something that we should continue to think of how do we make holistic approaches more concrete, and how do we turn them into methods, and also what they are good for in the end, in engaging with policy and with real practices. So yeah, very interesting presentations and discussions, I would say. And now I will move to panel 3. That was one of the panels on transforming governance, maybe the one that is easier to summarize than the last one. So my task is a bit easier than Rolof's. Sorry about that. It's the privilege of the organizer. Yeah, so it was about transforming governance from coordinative action to self-organization. This was the title. And the question behind this was, can we talk about adaptive governance, of governance that is evolving when confronted either with crisis situations, with experimentations, with some ad hoc solutions that change the way actors interact, and have a longer-term impact on governance, on the power relations, and so on. And the different speakers talked about some crises that were the starting point of their narratives, like the COVID pandemic in Portland, in the United States, where villages of tiny houses for homeless were constructed and institutionalized in this context of the pandemic. The housing shortage in the Netherlands as also a context for temporary housing solutions, or the apparition or the development of temporary housing solutions for people who cannot access, at least in a short run, social housing. Deprived neighborhoods or priority neighborhoods so this was Jolien's presentation. And priority neighborhoods in Lisbon, in Androniki's presentation, it's also kind of, let's say, critical junction. And mortgage arrears in Cyprus, that questions once more the exclusion from a dominant model of social integration, that is home ownership in Cyprus as in other southern European countries. So starting from these moments, some of the first two papers talked about something that can be maybe considered as new models of housing, even if they are not so new, like temporary housing, as a response to crisis, as I said, for the homeless or the people who are not eligible for social housing. And in these examples, but also in the other two examples, we see this tension between what we can call informalities, where self-organization is also put forward and can emerge, and on the other side, institutionalization or institutionalist approaches that can be a chance for such self-organized models to adapt governance or to penetrate in the main system and to challenge, to question the dominant system. But institutionalization can also be a limit in terms of allowing empowerment, allowing self-management, and also in terms of diminishing political potential of such models. And actually, as we have seen in the example Antonin Margier presented, actually reinforcing mechanisms of exclusion, such as exclusion of the homeless from the public space. So even if we had different approaches, governance approaches, rather more spatial approaches, we had different themes that somehow crossed over different presentations, such as the theme of property, that we have seen. So in Southern Europe is, let's say, like a social norm, and also a tool, let's say, to be developed, to be questioned once again in terms also of negotiation. I mean, co-creation seen as negotiation between different stakeholders that can be involved in promoting home ownership as still a valid way of integrating in society or being part of society, even if property as such might be questioned. I mean, the property as an absolute model of having all the rights, all the transmission, use rights, and so on, is not necessarily the way property should be understood, but property as such is not something that is not valid anymore. And also we have seen in the Dutch example that also different reasons related to property, the value of property, might influence where temporary housing for people who are excluded from social housing are implemented. And not always the better location are used. I mean, locations that also can allow for faster integration in society, access to amenities, and so on. So this integration of the different logics, such as access to welfare, access to the city, having different rights as a citizen, is something that still needs some more junctions, let's say. So these were some of the reflections that I picked up from the session. So thank you very much. I don't know if there are any other things to add.
No, thank you.
Yeah, so maybe tomorrow, because
Maybe tomorrow,
we still
yes,
have not so long, but a long day tomorrow. So thank you very much.